One hot summer day, all my brothers and I decided to go camping because we were trying to escape the heat in the city. We all planned a camping trip up in the mountains. So all of us were ready to pack up on Friday night and prepare to go early Saturday morning. So my wife got all set up and the kids were excited. When early morning came, we all met up at my oldest brother's house and waited till everyone showed up. We all followed each other's cars till we got to the mountain. It was a 4-hour drive. We finally made it to our camp area, and it was a nice area for kids to swim in, because there was a small stream next to it and no other campers nearby. When my wife first got out of the car and stepped foot on the ground, she had a bad feeling about the place. She told me that she was having a creepy feeling, but I just told her not to think a lot and to enjoy the camping trip because we have been working hard and don't have much time to enjoy each other. We unpacked our stuff and started to set up tents and get the firewood started. My oldest brother yelled out for us guys to get ready and go catch some trout for dinner. So we got our net and spear ready. We 4 brothers walked in the middle of the creek and started to catch some good-sized trout. For 1 hour, we walked in the middle of the creek. I had fallen behind and all my brothers were around 20 feet away from me at this point. It was getting dark, and I could see the flashlight getting a bit far from me. As I was concentrating on catching fish, I felt a cold wind blow into my face. I turned around, and to my surprise, my wife was standing on the side of the creek. It was dark, but I could still barely see her. My wife called up to me and said,
"Hey honey, why have you guys been gone for so long? The food is ready. Let's go eat."
I told her that she scared me because she just showed up out of nowhere. But I think to myself that my wife is always a scary cat, and she will never walk this far just to tell me to go eat. I was still standing in the middle of the creek and was slowly walking up to her. When I got close to my wife, I flashed my flashlight in her face. And to my horror, her face was rotten green and her tongue was hanging out long past her chin, eyes popping out. I freaked out and threw my flashlight into the water, and then that thing jumped over my head and landed in the middle of the creek. It just stares at me. I got out of the creek and ran as fast as I could to catch up with my brothers, who were in front of me. They were pretty far away from me by now. I fell and tripped so many times because it was pitch black at this time. I was running so fast in a panic that I realized I had just run past all my brothers, who were still walking in the creek catching fish. I jumped into the water with them, crying so loudly that I couldn't say a word. They dragged me out of the water and carried me back to the camp area. I was shaking up and couldn't say a word, but every time my wife comes up to me and tries to clean up my scratches and cuts, I can't look at her face because it will remind me of that monster. I told all my brothers that I was going to pack and leave, so my wife packed and got the kids in the car. Everyone else stays for the night. On the way out of the woods, it was so dark that the only thing you'd see was the headlights of the car. As we were about to leave the dirt road, my younger son yelled out, "Who is that lady standing next to the tree?" I got so scared that I pushed my chair down to a sleeping position. It felt like the longest ride home in my life. The next morning, I heard my doorbell ring, and when I opened it, it was my oldest brother. I asked him why they came home from camp so early, and he explained to me that right when I left home, they heard someone laughing out of nowhere in the woods. So after eating dinner, they all went to sleep in the tent, but when my brother woke up, he was sleeping next to a creek. He had no idea why he ended up sleeping next to a creek until he realized his arm and legs were all scratched up and bleeding. That is when he knew someone or something had dragged him out of the tent while passing out, because there was also a dragged mark on the ground. Everyone packs up so fast as soon as the sun comes up. Ever since that day, we stopped going camping. One day, my family and cousins were all going camping, and they asked me if I wanted to go along. Usually, I don't go camping because I don't like the noise the forest makes at night. To me, it is so eerie. This time, as usual, I was about to refuse, but when I learned that if I didn't go, I would be home all alone. Being home alone is something I tried to avoid too, so facing this dilemma, I decided that I would go camping instead. The next morning, we all got ready and went up to the mountain. The day there went as typical as any camping day. Setting up tents, eating, dipping into the stream, and running everywhere. It was at night that everything took a 180-degree turn. As per camping rules, at night we all gathered around the campfire to take turns telling ghost stories. For the average person, they love this time, but for me, it was not a pleasant thing. I got shivers whenever someone told a ghost story and would always whip my head to check everywhere in the darkness to make sure nothing, or no one, was standing there looking at me. Then came one of my cousins, and he told one of the scariest stories that not only me, but all of my other cousins and family got very scared. After he finished telling his story, I could feel my breath slowly returning to normal when I felt someone touch my shoulder. I instantly looked at my side, but there was no one there. So I turned towards my other side, saw one of my cousins, and thought it was him. So I gave him the eye and returned to looking at the fire. Then there it was again, a tap on my shoulder. I asked my cousin if he needed anything, and he said no. I asked him why he tapped me then, but he said he didn't do anything. I could tell he was telling the truth, so I got goosebumps all over. Then all of a sudden, I could feel it deep inside, my gut telling me to turn my head to the side quickly. I whipped my head to look at my side, and then I saw it. A hand slowly coming out of a bush near me. The hand suddenly stopped, and then it started shaking, as if whoever was behind the bush was laughing at me. The hand then withdrew back into the bush. I got so scared that I stood up and was about to scream when something in the distance caught my eye. It was a floating head, with its mouth open so wide that you could see the tongue sticking out. It was licking its face and looking at me, as if daring me to scream. Then, to my utter horror, I could hear a dragging sound in the bush next to my head. It sounded like something was being dragged across the ground. A body slowly appeared next to the head, and then slowly stood up, clumsily trying to reattach itself to the head. Whenever it tried to stand up, the body always made a creaking noise as the bones fell out and it dropped back down to the ground. The head then looked at me and whispered, "Help me reattach my head." And then, to my absolute horror, the body started turning, making all these creaking noises, and slowly trying to come towards me. It was at this point that I couldn't take it anymore, so I let out a bloody shriek. Everyone jumped up and ran towards me, asking me all kinds of questions. I just pointed towards the head, but it was not there anymore. I was so scared that I couldn't even tell them what happened. It was only after a long time that I was able to understand everything. That night, we just packed up everything and left. We didn't even stay until the morning, because everyone was afraid and just wanted to go home. On the way, I was sitting in the middle of the back seat. When we were about to leave the foot of the mountain, I suddenly saw a headless body on the side of the road, trying to stand up clumsily and waving its hand at me. I screamed again, and then, after a while, my cousin told me that it was trying to follow me home. He told me to close my eyes because he once heard from an elderly person saying that if a ghost is trying to follow you home, you have to close your eyes as much as you can until you reach home, because the ghost is trying to borrow your eyes as a direction. It was a good thing too, because I closed my eyes all the way home and didn't see anything again. No more camping for me. It was a spontaneous situation. I was fast asleep when I heard someone knocking on my door. I was very groggy, so it took me a moment to clear my eyes. I looked at my phone to check the time and noticed it was 8 a.m. I also noticed there were a couple of missed calls from my close friend, so connecting the dots, I assumed that it was him who was knocking on my door. I went to open the door for him, and after he came in, he told me he was going camping. I asked him what made him decide to go camping out of nowhere, but he said that his family was going camping, so he wanted me to go with him. They were leaving later that day. I told him all right, since it did sound fun, and I hadn't been to a camp in a long time. The camping site was very nice. There was a calm stream next to us, and we spent most of our time there just hanging around the stream and catching fish or just taking a dip here and there. It was fun. By 4 p.m., I was quite tired, so I told my friend that I was going to just go rest for a bit to regain my energy. I went to lie down on a leaning chair and dozed off. After a while, I suddenly woke up, but it felt so strange. It was so quiet. I didn't see anyone in sight, so I thought everyone was just at the stream. Then I heard laughter coming from there. I breathed a sigh of relief. I got up and went to the stream, following the sound of the laughter. But when I got to the stream, the laughter suddenly stopped. I thought it was weird, but the laughing started again, this time behind a bush in front of me. I just paused, and goosebumps suddenly started appearing. The bush was shaking, and a laughing voice could be heard coming from there. I knew something was wrong, so I didn't want to go check. When I was about to turn, a head suddenly popped out. I thought my heart was going to stop because the tongue was sticking out, and the head looked like it was licking at my direction. I turned around and ran back, but when I did, I saw something sitting in the chair I just woke up from. It was a female, but I couldn't see her face because her head was leaning all the way back and leaning backward off of the chair. All I could see was her body, and then her hair coming out from under the gap of the chair, swaying with the calm wind. It scared me so much that I just started running out of the campsite, and when my feet left the site, my body suddenly shook, and then I woke up. I looked around and saw everyone there, laughing and playing around. I felt so relieved that it was just a dream, so I woke up and went to the stream to let out the stress. At night, after we finished eating and telling ghost stories, I went to my tent, where only my friend and I were. I got in and saw that my friend was already in there. We were about to go to sleep when some of my friend's family came up and asked us if we wanted to go with them to catch some fish at night. My friend decided to go while I stayed in. After a while, I dozed off. I awoke to find that my friend had returned and was asleep next to me, at my back. I checked my phone and I had already been asleep for almost 2 hours. I was about to go back to sleep when I heard noises outside. I listened more carefully and heard voices coming closer and closer to the campsite. Then, when they were close enough, I heard them say they had caught a lot of fish tonight and would be having a good breakfast tomorrow. Then, what made me freeze was that I heard my friend's voice outside too, saying that he was tired, so he wanted to go sleep. I heard him coming closer to my tent, and then I suddenly realized, if my friend was outside, then who was in here? My hand suddenly felt the body next to me shift. It sounded like the body was shifting to look at my back. I could hear my heart thumping so badly, and then I could feel a breath near my neck. When I felt a tongue licking my neck, I couldn't take it anymore. So I stood up very fast and just shouted for it to stop. I could hear my friend coming in, and then he asked me what was wrong. I told him all about it, and that night we just stayed up almost all night just talking. Luckily, it was just one day of camping. But ever since then, I have not gone back to that place anymore.